Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time, as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today I want to talk about a series that I've talked about on this channel before, but never reviewed a game from, and that's my favorite series of all time, The Legend of Zelda. Now, I grew up playing the Zelda games from an early age. My brother didn't ever really get into them until the GameCube era of things. I got Link to the Past on the Game Boy, and I really loved the experience. But I never got into Ocarina of Time. I never played the Nintendo titles. So I was pretty new to 3D Zelda in general. But when we saw Wind Waker on the Nintendo GameCube, my brother was really excited about the game, and so was I. So he bought it really early on, and we got to experience it for ourselves and had a marvelous time from start to finish. I remember it being such a memorable experience, so I really wanted to recapture that. I've beaten it a few times, but I hadn't recently, so I booted up my GameCube, busted out Wind Waker, and played through it one more time. But before we get into that, let's talk about the kind of history of this game. Initially, after Majora's Mask, which was the last 3D title for the Nintendo 64, which really dove into more adult themes like grief, depression, a more adult experience, a more scary experience even, Nintendo debuted a tech demo for Link and Ganondorf fighting for the Nintendo GameCube, and it was way more realistic, way more crisp and polished, and people were really excited about this idea of a more lifelike Link and Ganondorf fighting. And unfortunately for them, when they saw the debut of the Zelda game on the GameCube, it was this cel-shaded, cutesy, kids-looking game that looked nothing like the tech demo that they had seen before. And I think it really disappointed and put off a lot of people. Fortunately, when it finally launched, every fear about it being like a kid's game was put to rest. This has plenty of adult theming. The very beginning of the game shows Link's sister getting captured by a giant bird belonging to Ganondorf that takes her off to a fortress in the middle of the sea. Terrifying thing to have happen to anybody. Link is just some kid on an island out in the middle of the ocean who doesn't really know a whole lot outside of life there on Outset Island. But he decides to be courageous and go out and try and rescue his sister, because who else is going to? Link is only 10 years old in this game too, adding to the amount of like heroism he's showing in putting himself out there. After making it to the tower and making it all the way to the top, he's confronted with Ganondorf for the very first time. And after getting a little monologue from him, and seeing how imposing and terrifying Ganondorf is, even in this shaded style, you get flung out into the ocean where Link almost drowns, but fortunately is saved by a talking boat, the King of Red Lions. This game is wild from the get-go. The first couple hours of the game are just wacky and weird, but absolutely brilliant. And the game does not let up either. The more you dive into this game, the more you recognize that this is a very adult game. It can be enjoyed by kids for sure. If you're not paying attention to the story super closely, you could have a really enjoyable experience. But if you are paying attention to the story, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of people giving up a lot of things, making lots of sacrifices. Link himself is braving perilous waters as a 10-year-old, trying to save his sister and then ultimately the land at large from Ganondorf. It's a spectacular experience narratively, and I think it's actually one that's fairly unmatched. There's a lot of dialogue that goes on in this game. There's tons of characters that are really important to the story. The twists and turns are phenomenal. I think this game probably puts on the best overall narrative experience in the entire series. I don't say that lightly. There are some really spectacular games. Even Twilight Princess that came out later, late on the Nintendo GameCube's lifespan and early in the Wii's, has some pretty intense theming and a pretty darn good story. Lots of dialogue, lots of great side characters. But I think Wind Waker probably does it the best. So let's talk more about what makes Wind Waker so good. So first and foremost, this game is one of the first to kind of break away from the original timeline. I haven't read all of the Hyrule Historia. I used to know the timelines pretty well, but this one is a break off from the Hero of Time. So Link, the main character of this game, isn't associated with the Hero of Time at all. He's not like the reincarnation of the Hero of Time. It even makes that statement a few times throughout the game as you progress the storyline. He's just some kid on an island out in the middle of the ocean. This isn't Hyrule anymore. You have a completely new land to explore. Link dons the garb of the Hero of Time because it's tradition on their 10th birthday. And he, over his struggles, becomes the new hero of legend. He becomes the hero of wind or the hero of the seas. He's now a new variant of Link, the holder of the Triforce of Courage. It's fantastic. And to see his journey from just a little kid to this seasoned adventurer who's ready to take on the king of evil himself is a spectacular ride from start to finish. So early on, I talked about how Link gets thrown into the ocean and saved by a boat. Now this red boat with a face on it that actually can talk to Link is called the King of Red Lions. He saves Link to try and help him to try and get the gears in motion. He saw his courage, he recognized what Link was trying to do, and wanted to assist him in this endeavor of saving his sister and ultimately saving the land. As you finally get your sail for the very first time, you can go out and pretty much explore anywhere in the world, which is a really cool thing, an unprecedented move for the Zelda series in general. There is very little that you can't do from the get-go. There are some little islands that are blocked off, like the fairy fountains that are blocked off by specific items you have to get later on in the game. So you can't go everywhere, but you can at least make it to the island first and see that you need a new item to progress. You could explore the entirety of the map at any point, at any time. Like, it's fantastic. I love how free this game is. There's no point where you really don't have an option to go off and do a bunch of side questing. Speaking of side questing, there are infinite amounts of things to do, it seems like, in this game. There are so many side quests, so many side stories that are really fun to follow and engage with. I've played this game, I think, 4 or 5 times at this point, and it's a longer game for the Zelda series for sure. And I keep experiencing new things each time I play it. I find a side quest I didn't know existed just by talking to some random NPC. This game is chock full of fun things to do. And the more you explore, the more you're rewarded for exploring and experimenting and doing different things. There are tons of challenges. There's like boat challenges. There's ones where you have to glide the furthest with your Deku Leaf that you get at some point throughout the game. There's all sorts of just fun things to find in addition to the main story. This is Zelda's first real foray into open world, and it does it spectacularly. If it weren't for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, this would easily be one of the better Zelda experiences in in opening up the world and giving the player so many options to do what they want to do. I know that Skyward Sword often gets praised as the predecessor to Breath of the Wild. A lot of the ideas from Skyward Sword made it so that Breath of the Wild could be this spectacular experience. But I would argue that Wind Waker's open world and its version of exploration really paved the way for Breath of the Wild being the experience that it is. I think a combination of those two is probably true to some degree. But the way that you explore in this game is by just sailing around. You get some other options later on as you unlock some more songs for the Wind Waker, the titular item that you get in this game. Instead of like the Ocarina of Time, you have the Wind Waker, an instrument that lets you conduct the winds so that you can sail in any direction that you want at any time. You'll also unlock things like being able to control certain items or willing people at times. You'll have companions that you can actually control and utilize their various strengths later on in the game. You'll also get things like a warping ability by utilizing cyclones. You'll face the god of cyclones at some point, be able to warp to different places on the map, making exploration much simpler. Now, I played the original GameCube version. I've never played the Wii U version, so I know the most of the differences between the two. I know in the HD version, they made the sailing time much faster, so it doesn't feel as boring or as sloggy. And they made a late game quest where you're looking for the pieces of the Triforce much, much simpler. Instead of looking for 8 charts that you have to find in various places by sailing across the sea again, and then going and spending tons of money to get them deciphered, and then going off to find where the map leads you to. Instead, you have, I believe, 5 pieces, and it's not that whole long sequence. You just have like one step to do for each of them. I believe that those are the big changes between the two. I think probably improved controls as well to make the game more seamless and smooth. I have heard that is the definitive experience. I haven't played it yet. I have a Wii U, and I don't know why I never really got the Wind Waker on it, but I would like to play the HD version sometime. But this most recent one, I wanted to experience the original one more time, so I would eliminate the rose tinted glasses altogether. I did remember the Triforce quest being kind of crazy when I was a kid. It took a long time. And this time I was prepared for it. And honestly, I had a really fun time doing it because it forced me to explore some regions of the ocean that I hadn't really put a lot of time into. The map is very big. There's a lot to do in this game, a lot to find. And it helped me to fill out my sea chart. I actually got to the point where I had discovered so many different places and unlocked them on my map. You have to feed bait to certain fish that jump out of the water, and they update your map for you to make it so that you actually have the island on your map. So I'm like, I'm only a couple squares out now. I'll fill out the rest of the map. And it kind of got me the drive to finish the sea map actually for the first time. I never had done it before. I actually assumed in my previous runs that some of the places you couldn't get a map icon for and that they were just going to be blank the whole time or unidentified on your map. So it was kind of a nice surprise for me this time around. The fetch quest that took quite a while, probably 4 or 5 hours. Probably didn't take that long. 2 to 3 hours, somewhere in that ballpark. I'm going to say 2 to 4 just to be generous. It took me about that long to do the entire Triforce quest at the end of the game. It was a little tedious. Fortunately, you have to spend money to decipher the charts. You go to Tingle after you help save him, and you get those charts deciphered. It costs almost 400 rupees to decipher a single chart, which is a lot. But fortunately, the quest preceding that, getting the chart deciphered, gives you lots of rupees too. Each dungeon that you go to actually gives you opportunities to get a ton of rupees. I never find myself short on rupees, so it was no big deal for me. And I actually genuinely enjoyed it. It gave me opportunities to sail to these places I hadn't been before. Find a lot of the underwater treasure that you get from sea charts. If you find sea charts, you buy them, you unlock them from getting certain things, and you open them up, a big pillar of light will appear on the ocean somewhere close to where the sea chart is, where the sea chart indicates. It helped me mop up those as well. I found, I think, almost a whole heart container's worth of heart pieces just by doing this extra quest, which was really fantastic. I love how the world kind of leads you to one thing and that makes you want to go do another thing. It kind of points you piece by piece throughout the game to explore the world and really get your money's worth out of your time in Wind Waker. It's fantastic. I loved exploring the open seas. I also love that this is completely separate from Hyrule. Hyrule does make an appearance. It's actually a city underwater that has been buried by the King of Hyrule in an attempt to seal Ganondorf away. Unfortunately, he was able to break free and be reincarnated into his form that you see in Wind Waker. Again, a very terrifying and imposing form. Probably the most terrifying Ganondorf in all of the Zelda series. With the exception of maybe Tears of the Kingdom, he is pretty scary in that one. But this, even for being like this cartoonish style game, he is really terrifying. The way he speaks, the way he stands, how he's just hulking over Link in this game is really intimidating. But Ganondorf is able to break out, and you actually get to visit Hyrule a couple of times. In fact, that ends up being the end place where you fight Ganondorf at the very end of the game, is in underwater Hyrule. You also find out that you are going to be the holder of the Triforce of Courage. When you do that Triforce quest, you unlock the Triforce of Courage and show that you are the true holder of it, that you are worthy of holding it. But Ganondorf's goal was to find the Triforce of Wisdom, which resides with Zelda. Zelda doesn't exist in this world. At least you don't realize that she does for a while. The ship captain that you go with early on, Tetra, ends up being Zelda. When you free her from Ganondorf, he tries to capture her and finds out that she is Zelda and she doesn't know what he's talking about. You fortunately get rescued. You take her underwater to the city of Hyrule, and the King of Red Lions, who ends up being the King of Hyrule, that sealed away Hyrule back in the day, reveals that she's Zelda, the holder of the Triforce of Wisdom, and tries to keep her safe there. The ultimate confrontation is actually a fight between you and Ganondorf and Zelda and Ganondorf. It's all three holders of the Triforce actually participate in the final battle, and it's fantastic. It's really out of this world good. That leads me to another point. The combat in this game is one of the best in the entire Zelda series. I like how there's a lot of variety in Breath of the Wild with weapons and comboing into certain things and using your special items. But combat alone in Wind Waker, just the sword play is fantastic. They implemented a counter system, so if you're Z-locked onto someone and they go to swing at you, a little sound will pop up, as well as a visual indicator to press the A button, which will allow you to dodge the attack and do a counter attack. This is just brilliant for this series. This alone made combat so enjoyable for me, and I forgot how good it felt. It makes encounters much less stressful. Even if you're fighting 4 or 5 enemies at a time, you can stagger your attention that you give to each one in a way to open up more opportunities to attack. And if you hit one of them, a lot of times you'll hit multiple ones at the same time. Which is fantastic. I love that they made combat way more diverse, because in a lot of Zelda games, it is fairly samey. It works exactly the way you want it to in those games. It's really great across the board, but there isn't a whole lot of variety in it outside of using the other items. This time, it makes combat itself really fun. You can use your other items to supplement your combat, but just the swordplay is fantastic. I really can't get enough of that. I think, again, this is probably the most fun I've had with swordplay in any Zelda game ever, including the newest titles like Breath of the Wild, just because it is so varied and dynamic. The boss fights are also out of this world good. I can't think of a single one that isn't unique and really fun to do. Zelda series in general is so good at making great dungeons and boss fights for those dungeons that utilize one of the special items that you found in that dungeon itself. The first big boss that you fight on Dragon Roost Island utilizes the grappling hook. You have the dragon god that sits atop this mountain. He has his tail stuck underneath inside the volcano, where a monster keeps grabbing onto it and hurting him. You use your grappling hook to latch onto the tail and swing across, which causes the ground the ceiling to collapse onto the monster, eventually cracking its shell and breaking it, and then you're able to kill him. The unique ways that they implemented the special item that you get in the dungeon is just so incredibly well done in every Zelda game I can think of, at least. Every single player focused Zelda game is just so good, and Wind Waker is no exception to that. I love the boss designs. I think they're fun and interesting. They're all unique. There's no like reskinning. There's no similar fights. They are all unique and interesting. There's also some great mechanics in this game, like using the grappling hook outside of combat while you're on your boat sailing out in the sea. That's how you get a little like treasure hook to reach down to the bottom of the sea and grab treasure chests down there. You can also use bombs while you're on the sea. It gives you a cannon on your boat. The way that they utilize and make these items unique is really cool and interesting. This is also the game that introduced the gliding mechanic that you'll see in Breath of the Wild later on. You have the Deku Leaf. You can jump off things and pop the Deku Leaf, and you can float and glide as long as you have the magic meter to do it. It's a gift that you get early on in one of the forest dungeon, and it's spectacular. It's absolutely everything you would want it to be. And I love how they improved upon it in later entries. This was the originator of that tech. And that's what I think Wind Waker needs to be praised for more. It's the originator of everything good about Zelda games that we see in future entries, specifically in the 3D category. A lot of the things that you see in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom that are just so fantastic all originated with Wind Waker. I love this game. I could talk about this game for a very long time. I will leave it about here, I think, now. I will say that the final confrontation with Ganondorf is the best in the series, hands down. I think it is. It's so fun. It's very intense. The setting itself is out of this world good. If you have an opportunity to play this game, I would highly recommend you go out and do it. Unfortunately, it's hard to get your hands on like a Nintendo GameCube and original copy. They are more expensive. And a lot of people didn't have a Wii U, so playing the Wii U version is also a little more difficult to do. It doesn't justify an entire console purchase. I really hope they port Wind Waker to the Switch before the new Switch comes out, or if they want to port it to that system, that's fine. Or I don't think they'll do a remake since the HD port came out so recently. But if you have an opportunity to play the Wind Waker, I highly recommend you go and do that because it is my second favorite Zelda game of all time. I will talk about my first in a later entry because it's also my favorite video game of all time. But if that Zelda game did not exist, the Wind Waker would be not only my favorite Zelda game, but also my favorite game of all time. It is currently my second favorite game of all time, period. I love that game so much, and playing through it again just solidified how much I enjoyed that game and how fantastic it is. It's well designed, the dungeons are perfect, the open world is really charming and interesting and begs to be explored, so I really recommend you go out and play it. I give the Wind Waker a platinum rank and the highest recommendation I can give. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next one.